there. That was a bad speech he gave to get out of it. I'm doing recon work so we can win Race Wars.
And I thought Race Wars was a real stupid name until I read that article.
Oh, are you telling me it's real?
Yeah, it is real, where racers now, because of all the cops, actually rent out tracks and they call it Race Wars, where drag racers come in and they race just off the streets for big money instead of on the streets for big money. And yeah, Race Wars is what they call it.
Is the point that they're also working out their racial differences here? Because they make like every time we see a driver, there's an Asian, there's Ja Rule, there's the Rasta guy. I mean,
Hector.
Yeah, Hector, exactly. They seem to want to say that this is a cultural melting pot. By racing cars, they're not shooting each other in gang violence.
And from everything I read and everything I saw in the bonus features, that's a reflection of reality. You take away the cars and you put these same kinds of people, the same types of people, and you'd end up with violence, murders, but you put them in this, they don't care about any of that. The racism is gone. It's all about how well you drive and what you drive.
That would have made a great movie.
Yeah, I agree. Why couldn't we have that movie? That's the same thing as a sports movie or a dance movie or whatever. Why couldn't this just be a cheesy formula about a guy on the outside who ends up in East LA and has to prove himself as a driver and never thought he could, but gets the girl and gets the respect?
You guys are discounting what made this the billion-dollar franchise, is that it's more than races. If this was just a sports movie where instead of playing baseball, they're now driving cars, and it was just this straight-up drama, maybe you two would like it better. It wouldn't be as kick-ass a film.
No, I'll tell you what I would have liked better. Not that this is a bad version of Point Break. Here's the biggest problem for me. There is a ticking clock. The reason Brian has to break this case is because truckers are getting ready to take war to the drag racers. Like, you have just set up a better premise than anything I've seen, that there are going to be truckers fighting drag racers, and you're trying to stop that movie from happening.
I didn't even catch that. Really? That was a thing going on?
Yes! That's why in the big action scene at the end, the trucker has a shotgun. Because they're arming themselves to go to war if anyone tries to rob them.
Okay. I don't want that movie at all here. I mean, I don't want any of these movies. It should, just as a reminder, say I'm out of my comfort zone here. I'm trying to find something I can compliment. What I compliment are the racing scenes. That stunt stuff is what's good here. This heist that you're saying is so awesome that got him all the money, that's where the Green Arrow flips. I am more or less on board with this movie, believe it or not, for 2/3 of it. As silly as it is, I see the appeal, but once we find out that, after being told there's no way that it's anyone but Dom, I'm thinking, okay, it's somebody other than Dom. It's gotta be Vincent. It's gotta be one of these supporting players here. There's no way they're gonna make Vin Diesel look this stupid to show him ripping off DVD players to get auto parts. He's the best driver there is. He should be winning the races and using that money to do whatever he wants.
But there's no drama in it. There's no tension in it if it's Johnny Tran, because they've set up the bromance and the romance. He's now sleeping with Dom's sister and he's friends with Dom. It has to be Dom. Otherwise, the end is not going to have any resonance at all. It'll just be boring. It'll be, okay, let's go get the bad guy now.
Well, how does this play into his backstory? We have all of this. I would say one of the worst scenes, if not the worst scene in the movie, is when Vin Diesel has to explain why he took a wrench to that guy, and it was because his father was a auto racer that got clipped and died. And
that scene used to be something I liked, but now when he's sitting there telling Paul Walker about watching his father die in a car accident, it's really uncomfortable.
For me, as much as I've tried to compliment Vin Diesel throughout this film, this little monologue is bad. I watched my dad burn to death.
Terrible.
I remember hearing him scream. They said he died before the tanks blew. They said it was me screaming. You can't deliver that good in any way. Yeah, it's just bad.
It's very cheesy. It's very B-movie. And so I'm just swallowing it because I understand that this drama isn't really supposed to work as drama. It's just giving him a moment where I think, oh, we're supposed to be sympathetic. We're supposed to understand why Paul Walker likes him and wants to defend him now. And so why did he go from avenging his dead father's murder to ripping off electronic trucks? I mean, that's petty. He's a petty thief? You told me he was the best fucking driver in the world, and now he is a petty thief that spends, I mean, I don't know how much money it takes to get trank guns and harpoons and all of that, but it's gotta be more than those TVs are worth.
I do agree. I didn't see that as a flaw in the film. I didn't think it through. But yes, I guess he probably makes, maybe it's hard to make that much money just drag racing. I mean, you gotta think he's getting hundreds of thousands for these trucks versus, 2,000 for a race.
No, not for trucks. I guess you're talking about he's selling the whole truckload.
Yeah.
I do want to know how he's unloading truckloads of DVD players. Maybe he's a big eBayer.
We meet the fence. The fence comes in later. He also stole Johnny Tran's engine. There's a neighborhood fence that you take all your stuff to sell.
Oh, okay, that's who that guy was.
Yeah, it should have been drugs. This should have been a drug plot. To give him that edge that he needed to menace, we needed to believe that he was a drug kingpin and that his sister's whole concept that, oh, this is not a gang, this is a team, was a lie.
But you're turning him into a villain when he's supposed to be an anti-hero. We're supposed to know he's a bad guy, but also not want to see him in jail. You're not going to get that if he's dealing drugs to kids. You're not going to get that if he's a murderer. It's a tricky line. It is a tricky line to walk, and I understand that for you, they didn't walk it right.
Yeah, it's the difference between green and red.
But the correction you are proposing would be a difference between a green and red for a lot of people because you want to like Vin Diesel. You don't want to turn him into a villain. And so your corrections are overcorrecting for the issues you're seeing.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't know we needed to like Vin Diesel because we all know that this franchise is going to continue and that he's eventually going to pop back into this. But if this were a standalone movie and this was the first time we were seeing it in 2001, yeah, it could be played that he's just a bad guy that needs to be taken down and Paul Walker is going to have to kill him in the end.
But that's not how Point Break went, and they're ripping off Point Break.
Yeah, but they also don't wear dead president masks when they rip off these semis. Another problem with this film.
I think that they do a pretty decent balancing act with what they're trying to do. If you're trying to make him not irredeemable so that you can understand why Brian's going to let Vin walk at the end of the movie, then you don't have him be a drug dealer. You don't have him be a murderer. You have him be greedy. You have him stealing from truckers. And we don't really get that fleshed out. And yes, you have pointed that out, and I cannot defend it. It is a horrible flaw of the film that his crimes are pretty much unmotivated other than extreme sports for extreme sports' sake. Then again, I don't know that Patrick Swayze had a great motivation in Point Break. If that remake actually happens, we'll have to revisit it.
Because he had to go to the best surfing. He had to travel all over the world. It's all about the motivations for these criminals or these anti-heroes. If you want to make us sympathetic, I need more than a speech about, I just live my life 10 seconds at a time. I want to know about this character if you want me to sympathize with them, even if he's breaking the law, and this film doesn't make me care about Vin Diesel.
If it's going to be a crime movie, you have to care about the crime. I'm cool with this as a racing movie, but they have not figured out this crime thing. If they didn't have the cars, you would be hating this movie.
I think without the surfing and the action, I wouldn't like Point Break either. I'm really curious to see if you guys can tell me that that's better if we review that film later, because to me, you're dealing with the same thing. It's stealing for greed. It's stealing to more indulge in your lifestyle. And I don't need a motivation beyond greedy. And if I'm still going to like the person, and this movie wants me to like Vin the way that movie wanted me to like Swayze. But you're right. The big high points of this film are not the talkie scenes. And that's kind of the complaint I have going from about the 30-minute mark to the hour 10 mark. There's no racing. It's rebuilding the car. This is the period after Johnny Tran has blown up Brian's car. And apparently there can't be a race without Brian. And it's going to take 40 minutes of this movie for him to get Mia in bed while building a new car.
What's crazy to me is that everything's building up to the big race wars at the end, and we think that that's where Brian is going to finally prove himself as a driver. You know, he brings them this beater car, says with $15,000 investment, you can turn it into the winner. They never have that race.
Yeah, when were they going to have the race? Was it the next day after they did this last final heist and they were going to take a break? Like, it seems like the race wars, them participating, was just a cover so they could go to Coachella and rip off a semi-truck. Like, what was their involvement?
This has to be rewriting. I saw that other people are credited on this. This had to be at some point somebody radically changing it. There's no way you have a racing movie in which you tell someone that they've got to prove themselves on the track and then never give them their moment. That is baffling beyond belief.
If it was a rewrite, it was not something that Cohen discussed either in his commentary with the original DVD release as the movie was coming out new, or his second commentary released around the time of Fast Five. So to them, it wasn't that big a deal. The thing should revolve around crime, at least the intent when they went in. It wasn't rewriting it during production. It was just script evolution, if that's the case. But here, what happens at Race Wars is tensions build with Johnny Tran, tensions build between Brian and Dom, and finally, the big thing, the thing you don't see coming, the twist, is that Jesse's the one who sparks everything by losing a race and then going and just driving away, pissing off Johnny Tran more and leaving the crew one man down. Now, there were only 3 cars in this heist, so why they needed 5 people, including their mechanic, to pull it off, why they're all worried that they're one man down when that one wasn't even a good driver, and I don't see Jesse as the kind who is going to rope the semi-truck and do that leap.
Oh, he was kind of like the engineer. He was told he should go to ITT Tech or something by Brian. I don't know. Maybe he knew the right trajectory to shoot that harpoon.
Have him listening to the police monitor. You give that other guy something to do. But the reason why we didn't see that coming, Arnie, is because it's incredibly stupid. There's...
Yeah, I was going to ask, did I miss something during all the talkie parts here where Jesse feels inferior for not racing a car, so he decides to put up his Jetta to race Tran? That seemed out of nowhere for me.
Out of way nowhere. Yeah, and all right, so Johnny Tran beats him. That's not the end of the races. We still got to get him versus Dom. We still got to get him versus Brian. I mean, I just don't get why Race Wars doesn't matter if that's what we were building towards.
It could have been anything. It didn't need to be Race Wars. It could have just been another drag race that night.
They could have made more money at Race Wars. Did you see that? That's like a rave. They've got all this money and security and barbed wire fences. They'd make more money winning Race Wars than whatever was in that semi that they go after at Coachella.
You can't tell me they're going to make 100 G's at Race Wars.
Why not? They made 10,000 off one street race.
Here is the bright point for me. When we get to Coachella, I don't understand why we've gotten to this point, but here we are. Maybe that opening heist scene didn't do much for me. I do love the stunt work here. When Vince, he's trying to climb up the harpoon to get to the trucker, and the trucker pulls out the shotgun. He's dangling from that truck. I do like this little action scene. This is a good 10 minutes of the film.
Oh, this is amazing. And here's the scariest freaking part. They actually had that actor on the side of a truck going 60 miles an hour.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yeah, it looks that way. And I looked him up. He's not a stunt guy. He came from the music world or something, which is why he's playing electric guitar at some point in the movie.
Yeah, when this movie was done, the stunt crew actually gave him an honorary membership into their team because the director said, you need to be the one doing this. And they had safety gear, but man, that was really him for a lot of it. You can clearly tell it's not Paul Walker standing atop a riding car. Yeah. I mean, it looks nothing like him. All of a sudden, Paul Walker, your shoulders got broader and your neck got bigger. But no, that was really the actor playing Vince hanging off of there. And they did some amazing real car work here. And this time you actually have the drivers in the cars as this is happening. Now, they're not driving. They're being towed at 60 miles an hour. But still, this is not green screen fakery.
Yeah, it's competent editing, so it looks like they're driving at these fast speeds. I will compliment the film. If this film was more like this 10 minutes here, I'd be really into it.
It's the climax of the film. It should be the most exciting thing. It is. And I love that Letty is competent too. You know, Vin's tire gets shot. Letty to the rescue. She's the one going under the frickin' semi-truck. That's really kick-ass. I love, earlier at Race Wars, when Johnny Tran starts fighting with Dom, Johnny Tran's henchman comes in. It's Letty that gets that punch in and takes him out. I love, in this case, the women are just as tough as the guys.
Yeah, but that's common. That's not like groundbreaking here. Name an action movie from the 90s or the 2000s that doesn't have this kind of female chick. This is stock stuff, Arnie. This is not incredible. This is exactly what I would expect to be in here.
Okay, Iron Man 1. Pepper Potts did shit. I mean, I can name a ton of movies that do not have female action stars in them, and especially that don't make them as tough as the men here. And really, it looks like Letty might be the one to rescue Vince.
Well, I'm thinking of a certain